Salutations, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. So this video is about Trump's psychology and how he maintains a considerable level of popularity. The last poll I saw, 42% approval rating, despite him really failing to deal with this coronavirus crisis. I'm not suggesting all other governments have handled it better, but the United States seemed to have more warning than just about any other country on earth, been able to study how it could be dealt with relatively well to minimize the problem and how it could be mishandled. But anyway, Trump, he seems to suffer from a basket of psychological disorders. And by the way, I've got no qualifications in psychology, so this is just my layman's view. I could be dead wrong. I welcome reproof. If I'm mistaken, please point that out. And that would be, obviously, I think one of Trump's major debilities is that he can't deal with admonition because, well, someone I know was working in Afghanistan, and the US military would sometimes say to him, "Red can me. This is my plan. Tell me why it's going to fail. I welcome this critical analysis. So I'll stress test my plan, see any of the weak points. How could I deal with that? Maybe I should completely change my mind." But obviously, Trump doesn't do that. He can't cope with constructive criticism, part of his fundamental immaturity. So there's a true self and a false self. And the gulf between the two is wider in Trump than anyone can think of. So what is he like? Well, he's obviously an ignoramus. He's emotionally brutal. I shan't say physically brutal because he would lack the courage it takes to be brutal. I know that's very nasty, but they do have some sort of bravery, even being cruel, but at least be a bit physically active. I know it's despicable. And he doesn't have the energy to physically harm people. Never did, I don't think, actually. He's irascible, egomaniacal, uncultured, foul-mouthed. He's a loser as well, with so many bankruptcies, so many failed schemes, which is why the American banks wouldn't touch him when the millennium came around, and that's why he had to get Russian banks to help him out. He's spiteful, revengeful, faithless. He's certainly not someone blessed with a good memory, but he's hypermnesic for insults. That's why he still can't take it, the small hands thing, what people said I did to him decades ago. He'll nurse that grudge. So, but how does he perceive himself? Well, his self-image is that he's heroic, he's stoic, he's blessed with incredible intelligence, he's very well informed, he's an equable person, morally upstanding, a winner, a zealous Christian, a lockstep Republican, and all of this is demonstrably false. Remember, he was a registered Democrat till about 8 years before he became president, and indeed donated to the Clinton Foundation. He supposedly knew all the terrible things that the Clintons were doing. Hillary Clinton was evil incarnate. Despite knowing this, Trump funded her, i.e., he is partly guilty of all her crimes, if indeed she's this monster whom he claims. So he may well be suffering from Alzheimer's, early stages Alzheimer's, like his father suffered from that disease, or senile dementia. Look at him so often flying off the handle. He appears to be maladaptive, can't handle adversity, can't accept unwelcome truths. And again, that's the very beginning of adulthood. Okay, sometimes you reach inconvenient news. I don't like this. This is going to mess up our plans. We're wrong. I won't accept that. And then he'll never say that he was wrong, which again, you need to be able to do to even be so towards the end of childhood. He behaves in a way that would often disgrace a toddler. Denying easily observable facts, such as like the crowd sizes inauguration. You could just look at the photos of that and compare it to photos of previous inaugurations. So flagrant, shameless lying, and that seems to be the central strategy of his. And the other tenets are always projection, false accusing others of his own worst vices. So there's a self-serving bias, which is a thread running through really all of his behavior. Illusory superiority. He labors under this delusion that he's fantastic in so many fields. He has this excessive self-confidence, which is unwarranted by any any proof. There's no evidentiary basis to think that he's so brainy, that he's such a good businessman, he's a fantastic deal maker, that he's courageous, and on and on and on, all the things he claims that he is. But is he even capable of these cognitions, saying, study the evidence and draw a conclusion therefrom? It would seem like not. And these days, he can only speak in half sentences, going in one direction, and then he veers off in another direction, doesn't he kind of go backwards, can't complete a sentence. So if that's not cognitive decline, what is? Like when he's had these briefings with world experts on coronavirus, claiming these professors of epidemiology were stunned by his in-depth comprehension of virology and epidemiology and things like that. It was an evidenceless proposition. Who said this? Um, I didn't hear any of those professors. I would like to point to any statements or name some who praise him to the moon, saying he has such great understanding of this. He understands all the particulars. I'm not saying I understand the minutiae. I don't know anything about it, but I don't think any of them said it. He's so insensitive, like at 9/11, going on the radio to boast about how now this building was knocked down. His building was the tallest one in Manhattan. And how on earth does he get away with it? You know, Hillary Clinton castigated for Benghazi not doing enough to get people out, or in some talking about some terrorist attack, Obama didn't actually use the word terrorist in relation to it, and Republicans gone apeshit over that. But Trump, he sees 9/11 as a chance to brag about his property empire, and he's not the great business mogul that he says, because so many of his businesses have failed. He's obviously a fraudster with Trump University. How on earth he's not in a penitentiary, I do not know. People get decades in prison for a fraction of what he's done. So he'll muzz the media when they're telling the plain truth. He will say it's fake news. Well, he of course mass produces fake news, and his acolytes pumping out lies at an incredible rate. So he's created this alternative universe about himself and about other countries which are so pernicious, how he will be so oleaginous in sucking up to despots, but he will be so furious in his tirades against American allies, Canada, France, the United Kingdom, and so on. It seems to me that he did so well because he is quite newsworthy. He was always making a splash, always trying to grab the front page, had name recognition, and it's always a motive. Everything he says or does, he always opines. He's got an angle on things. Doesn't appear to be neutral about anything. He doesn't really do the middle ground or moderation. Always has to ratchet up to the top level. So that grabs people. As messages are simple, there's repetition, and speaking in images like a wall. Everybody knows what a wall is. Even the dimmest person can grasp that. There's a small matter that the wall has not been built, has not even been begun. Mexico's never going to pay a peso for it, as they repeatedly said. He's dropped that lie, but never won him the election, hoping it'll sink him in the next one. But these ideas were understandable, even by the slowest person. The dimmest person could get it. But it seems he's got attention deficit disorder. He can't concentrate on long briefings and gets bored of his own sentences, I suppose. Can't take in difficult matters, offering people binary choices in a complex word where they're shades of grey. That, should we have a trade war or not? Yes, we should. Are all Muslims bad? Yeah, they are all bad. But then said there are a lot of good people. But how come you're going to ban them all, except you're not going to ban them all? I know. If it sounds nebulous, well, it is, because none of it makes sense. So that's why he garnered a lot of coverage, and he still does. I mean, I know he's president, but even in relation to that, the lead item is so often what he said or did each day in the American media. So he's been given the oxygen of publicity. I wish it could be cut off, but you can't very well ignore the president. He had name recognition for decades. And there's this cognitive bias where people prefer the things familiar to them. I always think about this, like, I don't really like, say, Chinese music or Punjabi music, not just because I'm not used to it. I'm accustomed to music from Ireland or the Western world more generally. Not that it's better. I mean, how would you even judge it objectively? It's a matter of taste. So the media find it difficult to cover. Partly there's this curse of knowledge. Journalists are quite well clued up people, maybe assuming that the public are as well, occasionally explaining things in words of a syllable. But it's difficult to get people to concentrate on complex matters. We've been increasingly conditioned to have the attention span of a mayfly. We want color, movement, change, and these matters are tricky, difficult to understand, take a long time to explain, and a lot of people simply don't have the attention span to listen to all that. And the truth is sometimes uncertain, is often blurred, and it takes more intelligence to accept that we don't know, because it's not satisfying. We want to know that it's not that clear cut. It's more of a mixed picture. A lot of people won't accept that, particularly people of Trump's ilk, people of his sort of outlook want it to be black or white. Anyway, under Clinton they talk about the death of shame, but we've really had it under Trump, who's absolutely shameless, not embarrassed by anything he said or done. He never apologizes, notably. Other people mess up, they apologize, they reckon they got it wrong. Bill Clinton did, despite the so-called death of shame. Remember John F. Kennedy said how defeat is an orphan, but victory is 1,000 fathers. Well, I actually think they said it the other way around. But after the Bay of Pigs failed, he owned up to that one. He accepted responsibility. He was there on the beach to meet the guys when they were repatriated from Cuba. So he was man enough to do that. Trump doesn't have a shred of manliness in that sense, despite always bragging about just how macho he is, this over masculinity, because obviously he's got something to prove, that he suffers from a profound sense of inadequacy. Why is he got this deep-seated sense of worthlessness? Well, he's right about one thing: he is worthless. So Trump's obviously a moral coward, not willing to accept responsibility, to say he got it wrong, to apologize. The nearest he came was saying, "Excuse me," to Megyn Kelly. You could see the utter insincerity in his face, in his tone. It was mocking. He was mouthing the words, but there was no meaning behind them. So like saying he's so courageous he would have dashed into Parkland High School without a weapon to confront the shooter. When has he ever been remotely physically brave? When has he ever been remotely morally brave? Always doing the easy thing, always doing whatever would aggrandize him. He's never said anything that his claque wouldn't like. Anyway, so there's this tendency to overestimate oneself. That's a cognitive bias from which he suffers. A lot of people do. People rate themselves above average. So I go out of my way to say I'm dreadful at some things. Not to overrate myself, even in areas where I'm quite gifted. So he has many grandiose delusions, and saying that he was going to be fantastic at getting medicine prices down, building this wall, winning in everything, going to be tired of winning, the economy is going to be fantastic, the stock market was going to be the highest ever, they were going to absolutely annihilate ISIS, they're going to win the trade war, they're good and easy to win. So there's optimism bias, and he played to that. And the optimism bias is really at an extreme level in the United States. They say that's where the optimists went. When let's not be optimists or pessimists, let's be realist. And what does the evidence support? It might actually be that the outlook's quite rosy. It might be that the prospects are quite grim. But let's do this in an objective manner, right? Emotion should play no role in it. I know it's difficult to get it out of the way because we are emotional creatures, but we have to strive to do so. But with Trump, no, it's nothing like that. It's all about how things feel, not about objective reality. So the self-esteem culture is partly responsible for this. People should have a reasonably high sense of self-esteem, a high estimation of themselves, but they shouldn't overestimate themselves or indeed underestimate themselves. Try to get it right. Difficult, I know. But Trump is obviously just off the charts, which is why he's almost incessantly banging on about how marvelous he is. And he suffers from impulse control, sort of the tweeting several times a day, tweeting in the middle of the night. Is he an insomniac? Not good either, which might also explain why he's so crotchety. You think, oh, he's a cantankerous old man. I don't think he's always been a curmudgeon and might have trouble sleeping. Could it be prostate trouble, getting up to micturate several times a night? Possibly that. Maybe that's why he's up in the wee hours. I don't think it's his work ethic. He's a layabout, always munching McDonald's, watching Fox News. So suffering obsessive compulsive disorder about his status, all right, fixated with his status anxiety, which is not good news because he always wanted to leave his mark on things. And that's why he always talks in superlatives. His buildings were the tallest, lie. He was the richest, lie. I mean, he wasn't the very richest, but the $10 billion, never releasing the tax returns because it would prove that to be a complete falsehood. So he doesn't really mind when there's evidence which proves his claims to be utterly bogus. But on that one, he does, because I suppose that is so at the core of his self-image. What else? That he was the bravest, or he's the best negotiator, the best at so many things, the brainiest, or indeed that his penis is the biggest, saying, if my hands are small, something else is big. What else could that possibly mean? I just couldn't believe it, him saying that at a Republican rally. There's a time and a place for everything, and I'm fine with vulgar humour, scatological and or sexual humour, but not at a political rally. And you're speaking to the Republican base, evangelical Christians. These are values voters. They care about family values, they're clean living, they loathe foul language, but somehow Trump is uniquely immune. He can do everything which is antithetical to their worldview, be in breach of all the rules, break every commandment, and that's absolutely fine. They don't even tick him off. Wow. It's nauseating, the rank hypocrisy there. Anyway, you know what they say about man with flash cars, if he's going to boast about his large penis, and he has quite a few cars, or indeed very, very tall towers. I think a Freudian analysis would come up with a very clear explanation for this behavior. So he is remarkably slothful, but he's indefatigable when it comes to self-promotion. He's always been a tireless self-publicist. And maybe quite an innovative one, even stooping so low as to phone up newspapers in New York in the 80s, putting on a false voice or claiming to be somebody else, or saying, you have to put that my mistress Marla Maples had the best sex of her life with me, things like that. Anyway, the zeal for boasting and doing that when he should be spending his time thinking, how am I going to save people's lives in coronavirus and indeed rescue the economy, which is going south fast. He's such a braggart. Why? As I say, he obviously suffers from low self-esteem deep inside. And by the way, if his male member is so large, show it. His prodigious size. He shows off about everything else. Release a photo. Show it at a rally. Why not? Anyway, think about people who've really outclassed him in so many ways, and that's a lot of people. Jeff Bezos, he doesn't always harp on about how wealthy he is. He just donates to charity. Or you could say the same about Bill Gates and so many of the billionaires. Usain Bolt, he doesn't bang on about being fast. Not that Trump has claimed to be an athlete. That's about the only lie he hasn't told. People who actually achieve things, they let the feet speak for themselves. Or, Special Forces soldiers. I met a couple. They're quite unassuming, soft-spoken, undemonstrative people, not throwing their weight around because they have self-assurance in this regard, and on and on. So this braggadocio and passes for confidence among some, but it bespeaks inner self-doubt. Anyway, at least he doesn't claim to be a polyglot. He's married, his wives have spoken different languages. The first one spoke Czech as her mother tongue. This one speaks Slovenian as a native language. Marla Maples, I suppose you could say that she didn't speak English either. But he doesn't at least claim to be a mezzofanti. And by the way, his wife's claim to speak fluent Italian seems dubious, bearing in mind that she visited an Italian school and didn't avail herself of this golden opportunity to exchange a few pleasantries with pupils or teachers in Italian. So this is anomalous that fundamentalist Christians should give Trump their fulsome endorsement when he is about as far from Jesus as it's possible to imagine. Incidentally, I'm not a believing Christian. I'm not close to the Christian idol, but I don't pretend to be or say I know loads about the Bible. I know quite a lot. I know a lot more than him, I can say without fear of contradiction. But he appears to know nothing about the Bible, 2 Corinthians instead of 2 Corinthians. I remember him at a rally saying, nobody knows more about it than me. Christians are supposed to be modest. Jesus was self-effacing. And he's vain. What about vanity, vanity of vanities and all that? That's a vice. He didn't even pretend to be religious until he tried to get the Republican nomination. And how did these morons fall for it? But it reminds me, well, one of the principles of Christianity, Saint Ignatius Loyola, when he founded the Society of Jesus, said, I would believe that a black is white if the Pope told me that. So that's it, is disbelieving your own eyes and ears, is suspending belief, not suspending disbelief, and just lying to yourself. That is held up as the supreme virtue. And the more ludicrous the belief is, the more virtuous you are. You're storing up rewards in heaven if you can believe things which are utter nonsense. That tests your faith. So it's a dangerous thing to privilege faith over reason, over evidence. And you see how it's obviously made its way into the political sphere. Anyway, when he's praying in the White House, it's so blatantly acting. How can people not see that he's so fake? So there's this cognitive dissonance for these ardent Christians that Trump is so utterly iniquitous, and yet he's to be their frontman, a standard bearer for Christianity, not just for the Republican Party. Obama, well, what do they disagree with them? They disagreed with them on abortion or gay rights. But apart from that, he wasn't sort of anti-Christian. He was a believing, worshipping Christian, and he wasn't an adulterer. He wasn't foul-mouthed. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't a liar, and on and on. He told a few lies, but not on Trump's level. And then this hilarious explanation that Trump is Cyrus. Oh, so Trump's Iranian. Great. I bet that would go down a storm at the Republican National Convention. And that Trump was chosen by God, some of these Republican pastors say. Well, if so, it must automatically follow that Obama was also selected by God. Well, I know Trump, he certainly wasn't chosen by the popular vote. Anyway, no one said that about Obama. Imagine if Democrats had come out saying that. Republicans would have been up in arms about it. So Trump's psychology is a real witch's brew, and unfortunately it exploits certain weaknesses in some of the American psyche. I'm not saying all Americans suffer from this, or even the majority, but a good 40%, which is why he's able to command the seemingly unwavering allegiance of at least 40% of the populace. Claiming there's a slanted media against him, when of course Fox is absolutely sycophantic and on his side, the semi-official mouthpiece of the Trump administration, and the others really just hold him to account, ask reasonable questions, and are a bit chary, sometimes fight shy of calling a lie a lie. Because it might seem to be prejudiced, but it's not. It's telling the plain truth. If he lies all the time, you should say it, not say, well, we're not sure. So he has persevered, shown pertinacity in the face of fake news, as he would have us believe. And then Trump shows such hauteur when challenged by the media with reasonable questions. Just flies into a rage, just loses his cool. He really flies off the handle when asked things he doesn't like, be grossly insulting to them. That's why I was saying that Megyn Kelly was riding the Crimson Wave and vile insults like that, and then denying it was an allusion to menstruation. What else could it be? Insulting people's intelligence? Well, maybe not the intelligence of people on his side. So what are the causes of his cognitive makeup or his psychology? I guess much of it is genetic. Is it environmental? Perhaps. But then it didn't seem to have the same effect on his brother. I don't know that much about his brother, the alcoholic one who died in the 70s. And his sister, the judge, what little I know about her, she's on an even keel. She's got her feet on the ground. So I don't think it's that environmental. He was always a lunker, might have given him a bit of self-belief that tends to help. And came out with this aggressive arrogance. His family background, as in having tons of money, being a WASP in New York, might have contributed to it. This idea of greed is good, he grew up with that, swaggering, and unfortunately that impresses an awful lot of people. People think that this kind of mindless thuggery and conceit is leadership material if you behave like that. So that's my take on Trump, what he's like, why he's so dreadful, and why that actually appeals to some people, how some people are willing to tell themselves that black is white in relation to Donald J. So please donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, and follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook. Good night.